Hello and welcome to a special off-season Cat's Whiskers podcast. My name is Jono Bullard. We are going to be looking at Corey Neilson's retention as Panthers coach. We're also going to be looking at other things that have been happening in the Elite League, especially Gerad Adams' recent sacking by the Sheffield Steelers, and we'll be looking back at Team GB in the World Championships. Joining me, as always, to look back on all this is Aaron Lord.
Good evening.
Good evening, mate, and also Mr. Andy Haywood.
Good evening.
Good evening. And I think we will start at the very top and with Corey Neilson being retained as Panthers coach, signed this Tuesday. I think a surprise for many, but I'll come to you guys first. And are you happy with that, Andy?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, absolutely. He's proven himself to be successful, and whilst the league campaigns haven't gone brilliantly in terms of trophy count for the league campaigns, last year was the first trophyless season we've had since 2009, and I just think for a coach that's for a person that as a player and a player coach and a coach has done so much for the club, I just think after one trophyless season it'd have been a bit harsh to ditch him.
Aaron, are you happy with Neilson coming back?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not jumping up and down for joy, and I'm not obviously, I'm not disappointed at the same time. I think, this season coming up is a big season for Corey Neilson, and I think it's a big season for the Panthers. So, like I said on our last podcast of the season, I said as long as Corey has the drive and the motivation to improve on the last couple of seasons, and he still has that within him, then I'm more than happy for him to come back. So let's hope he has that. And I think from the interviews that you hear on the Panthers today and the article from Matt Davis in the Nottingham Post, it kind of seems that he has got a little bit of that sort of motivation back, and he sounds a little bit more happier, shall we say, than what he was at the end of the season. So as long as he's got that, and we see that in his recruitment, and we see it in the Panthers next season, then I'm happy for him to be back.
Andy, Aaron mentioned the Matt Davis article in the Nottingham Post today, which was an excellent article, and we saw a bit more of a human side of Corey that we very, very rarely see.
Yeah, absolutely. But at the end of the day, a lot of people like that. Their business side and their working life is very different to their personal life. And one of the things that I kind of agreed with on what he put in that article was the whole, the confidence that you have to have in a position like that. It is a fine line, and you can understand why a lot of people don't like it, or they take things that are said the wrong way, but especially in a sporting environment, you look at boxers or anyone in a sort of sporting environment, football managers and stuff. They are all extremely confident in themselves and in their team. So I just think that we've got a coach who's been there and done it now, and I just think that with the lack of distraction, as it were, from Europe, it'll be really interesting to see how we go this season.
Aaron, you was mentioning about the interviews, and before we started recording, I had a listen to the interview that he did with Gary Moran on the Panthers website, and one of the things he said that I thought was very, very interesting was about looking at the past two seasons. He says we haven't been as quick, we haven't been as offensive, and he'll look to tweak that. And I think that'd be a music to a lot of fans' ears, because a lot of people have said that last season wasn't the usual brand of Panthers hockey that we've come to expect, especially under Corey Neilson as coach. that's got to be a positive, surely.
Well, initially you say yes, don't you? But playing devil's advocate, anybody can say anything to please fans at the moment, but we need to see that in the recruitment side of it, and then we need to see it, from September to beginning of April, really, don't we? But I think it's a positive thing, obviously, and you read forums, you see Twitter and the reaction when this news, was made public, that a lot of people said as long as we go back to the Neilson-esque type of hockey, and I'm pretty sure, and if you read the article and then you listen to the interview, it comes across that Corey Neilson has learnt a lot from these past 2 seasons, and I think a lot of people are obviously wanting him to make those tweaks, because the last 2 seasons, and especially the previous one, the one just gone, wasn't great. It wasn't exciting, and that's what we expect, and what we've come to expect, should I say, of Neilson's hockey. And I think that will be good for him to get back to that hockey as well. So it's positive at the moment, but we need to see it in recruitment. We need to see that those type of players come to the Panthers organisation. And one thing that I thought was quite interesting in that interview that he did on the Panthers website, that he said that they'll take their time. They're not going to rush into anything. And I think that, yes, we were in the CHL last season, so we had to get a roster together. But if at the time, I remember people saying about the Steelers that they waited, and you can pick up a high quality import later on in the off season than what you do in the early part of it. So I think that was quite interesting for me, to hear him say that he's going to take his time, he's going to look at the options, because I think as well, I think he must realise, and I think a lot of fans realise, and maybe the club realise, that this is kind of last chance saloon, really. I think there's got to be an improvement, and I'm pretty sure everybody involved understands that.
I think one of the things for me why I'm happy that Corey Neilson is coming back is Neil Black has said that ourselves and Brayhead will be going to 4-line hockey next season. That means we've got to bring in more Brits despite the import increase. And if there's one thing that Corey Neilson does have an excellent record on, it's developing British players. You only have to look at the likes of Mark Richardson, who he turned into one of the best defensemen in the country. The progress that Steve Lee has made in his time at the Panthers. Robert Farmer has grown as a player in the past couple of seasons, and then you look at the likes of the players that have been brought through. So Lakovic, Ollie Betteridge hopefully next season, and then Lewis Hook and Jordan Cowney, who came in and did a fantastic job in some games earlier this season. So Andy, it's really, really important that with having so many Brits and having 4 lines, we have a coach who understands about developing those sort of players.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've mentioned the guys that have been under his tutorage, and that all of them, to a man, have shown that they are very good hockey players, especially for their ages as well. I mean, it's so easy to forget that people like Steve Lee and Robert Lakovic and Robert Farmer are still so young, and it is quite scary to think how young they are. Because they've been around for ages, and the fact that they've been around for ages and they've been gaining all this experience under Corey's, teaching, and they've become extremely good hockey players out of it as well. So yeah, I completely agree. He's the type of guy that has always given the younger players a chance. He's as he's put in his article as well in the Evening Post, he's never really been one to punish players, especially the younger players' mistakes, by just riding the pine constantly. Yes, they might miss the rest of the game if they've done something that's costly. They might have to sit out a period or two, but invariably, the next game it's a new slate. They start again, and they go back to the basics with training. So yeah, I think that's a very good point you make, Jono, with regards, obviously, the development of younger Brits, because ultimately and realistically, they're the ones that are going to be bolstering the squad, because we've seen time and time again that the main core of the older Brits are established with the teams that they're already at. So the chances of pinching a couple from another club is very slim. So I wouldn't be surprised if you saw some of the players that were named in Pete Russell's GB squad come back to the league. Not necessarily Panthers, but people like Jack Prince, Liam Stewart. Maybe not this year, but certainly in a couple of years, they're going to be hot on teams' radars because of the way the league's going. And obviously, if us and Brad start doing four-line hockey and it works and it gets fans through the door and it's exciting hockey, and they win trophies, let's face it, every other team in the league is going to be following suit very, very soon.
Aaron, of course, we've all said that we're quite happy about Corey coming back, but there are those fans who felt a change was needed. I think perhaps an overall majority are quite happy with Corey returning, but like you say, there are fans who wanted a change. Can you understand why they thought that after the past couple of seasons?
Yeah, totally. To be honest, Corey's, this will be his 10th year that he'll be involved in the Panthers. I think it'll be his 8th as the coach. That's a long time to be a manager or the coach, should I say, of one club, one team. Two relatively disappointing seasons, especially the last one. There's going to be people out there that just feel that the time was right for a change. I don't see any problem with people thinking that. I was of the view that it did sort of have that feel of that maybe things were coming to a natural conclusion, but obviously that's not the case, and everybody now has to get behind Corey and the Panthers roster when it comes out in September. But no, I think it's fair for people to say that they wanted a change, because the one thing that I would say with that is, look at how long Paul Thompson was at Coventry for, and he was very successful. But it kind of, and let's be honest, Corey has said it, I believe, in his in the article with the Nottingham Post. He says that he knows he's not going to be the coach for the Nottingham Panthers forever. So there will become a time when, either he steps away or the club make that decision. A lot of people thought it might have been this season. It could be next season. We just don't know. But I think I don't think you could complain or moan at people for saying that they wanted a change.
We asked you for some tweets about Corey returning, and just a selection of the quite a few we got. We did get quite a lot, but Antoine Marijon, he says, please, he has a chance. A victim of his own success, maybe. And Andy, that's probably quite a fair point, because Corey is without doubt the most successful coach in Panthers history, and obviously that is going to raise the expectation levels. And I suppose when you don't win anything like last season, it then becomes a major disappointment.
Yeah, absolutely. We went from a season where we won everything to a season where we didn't play particularly well, but we managed to get ourselves a trophy. And as much as people will say that was a disappointing season, at the end of the day, we got silverware that year. So realistically, looking at it from from management's point of view and from Corey and the players' point of view, we still won one of the 3 major trophies of the year that year. The problem that we had this season was, personally, I think, was the brand of hockey, and I think obviously you touched on it earlier on with regarding going back to a more attractive attacking form of hockey. When you play attractive attacking hockey, even when you lose, invariably the games are entertaining and good fun. The problem that we had last year, when we tried to play more defensive, and then obviously we ended up on that spell where we were losing games, we weren't playing particularly good hockey to watch. And so the problem that you find is that while you're winning, it's tolerable, But as soon as you start losing, it becomes incredibly difficult to get behind the team because of the brand of hockey that they are playing. And I think getting back to the whole attack-minded, typical Corey Neilson type team that we've seen before, and has been successful. I think that's a really good step, and one that I hope that we certainly see again.
Aaron, a couple of tweets that we had, one from Hazel Sayers and one from Danny Gears, but they both say about bringing in an enforcer or bringing in a hard man next season. Is that something that you'd like to see?
Yes, but they also, well, no. I'm going to say no to your question because you asked whether I want to see an enforcer. I don't want to see an enforcer. I want to see somebody that contributes to the team, as in whether they be a forward or defensively. They add to the team regarding skill, but they have to have the toughness to be willing to stick up for their teammates when called upon. An enforcer and somebody that's willing to stick up for their teammates are two different things in my eyes. The role of a pure enforcer, I think, is going out of hockey altogether. But we do need more toughness in the team. We can't rely on Robert Farmer again to be the one that is sticking up for his teammates when something happens.
But he is the Farminator.
He is the Farminator, that's correct. #Farminator. But, we need toughness, of course. Do we need an enforcer then? I would say no, but we definitely need more toughness than what we had in the campaign just gone.
A lot of the tweets that we had talk about not having the distraction of the CHL next season. Andy, do you think the CHL has become a bit of an excuse, or do you think it's a valid point?
I think it's a bit of an excuse, but it's one that I can understand is being used. Personally, from a personal standpoint, I think being involved in the CHL is absolutely fantastic for the club and for the league. But at the end of the day, there's an awful lot of people who didn't want us to be part of the CHL, and they don't want us to be part of the CHL. And a season out of the CHL might prove them right, or it might just prove that this league is exceptionally close, it is exceptionally tight, and it could go any way. What I did find interesting with regards something Corey had said in the post was the fact that he thought it was a far more open league this year, and he actually said that 7 teams would be challenging or at least make a certified push of improvement towards getting that league title. I'd be interested to hear his thoughts on. I mean, he mentioned Fife in there, and I agree that obviously the Scottish teams. They will play good because of the rivalry type games that they have. If they can get a streak going in their conference against the rivals, they're going to pick up a lot of points, and so I can see that.
Well, you look at 7. I mean, there's obviously Panthers, Belfast, Sheffield, of course, Cardiff certainly. I think if Coventry keep Chuck Webber, they could certainly become contenders. Brayhead are going to be contenders, and if Fife push their way in there as well, then there's your 7. So it's certainly feasible, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, looking at the squad building so far, so 7 players signed so far. Brian Schmidt is the only import. He comes back on the university deal. Evan Mosey, who was confirmed on Tuesday of this week, and then Brit, Steve Lee, Sam Oakford, Robert Farmer returns, who was on a multi-year contract, as does David Clark, and Oliver Betteridge comes up to the Panthers full-time. Aaron, do you think that's a good start to the team building?
Yeah, I think it's obviously the Brits are the ones that you see first of all. Schmidt, as you just said, there is on the second of his 2-year uni deal, so I don't think a lot of people knew that, but he was always going to come back. And then, Mosey for me is somebody that you need on your roster. First time in the Elite League last season, showed a lot of promise. also, he needs to improve in certain areas, especially because of the advantage that his pace and speed gives him. But I think that's a good start. There's still a lot of other places to fill. I'd like a couple of more Brits if possible, and then we'll start to see the type of imports that we get in. But I'm pleased that we've got Bettridge full time. I was very impressed with his attitude and what he brought to the Panthers in the time before he got his injury. So I'm looking forward to seeing him full time next year. But I think it's a pretty solid start. And like I say, I'd like to get a couple of more Brits signed up before, especially somebody goes to Australia. And then we'll see what the imports bring. So solid start.
Andy, Evan Mosey, of course, was one of the players that came out of last season with an awful lot of credit. I don't think a lot was expected of him when he signed. So in the last close season, he proved everybody wrong. He had a fantastic season, and I think with him and Robert Farmer, who were two of the better players on the squad, delighted to see them back in the team.
Yeah, Evan Mosey was one of them players that surprised everyone. There was a bit in the press release regarding that where teams and the fans were sort of raising their eyebrows over a guy who didn't have much of a CV and was coming straight out of 1 year professional and then played in Holland for a season and people were always going to ask questions about that kind of signing, but he proved from the start that he was here for a reason and that he'd got faith in what he was supposed to be doing, and he proved to be a very, very good signing. One worry I do have as such isn't necessarily the players that we have signed, because I don't really have a problem with any of them so far, but it's that worry that reading social media, the amount of people that want player X back from last season, and we need to re-sign this player, and we need to re-sign this player from last season. What people have got to remember and put into perspective is by everyone's own admission, last season was not a success. It was a bad season for the Panthers, and a lot of people wanted wholesale changes. What we've got to think of, we've signed 7 players so far, and all 7 of them played for us at some point last year. Now, I know obviously a lot of them are Brits, and realistically they were always going to come back, but you've got to, it's a balancing act now between getting a team that is going to be far enough removed from what we witnessed last season, but also trying to keep hold of some of the stars that we did see. There's no question, and if Cody Wild, Colby Cohen, and Guillaume Doucet and K-Wall, if they came call, and Benedict as well, if they said we want to play, realistically, yes, he would take them all back.
But I disagree with that.
But like I say, you're running a fine line between creating a new team that we were excited about hearing and were excited about seeing, and creating the same team that we witnessed last year that everyone seemed to be incredibly despondent about.
Aaron, you said you disagree.
Yeah, just purely I wouldn't have Colby Cohen back.
Why?
Because I don't think he benefits the Panthers in the right manner. Very good hockey player, but I don't think the cons outweigh the pros for me with Colby Cohen. But I would obviously take everybody else that Andy mentioned back, but that would probably be my limit. Cody Wild, Guy Doucet, K-Wall, of course, but I can't see that personally. And I'd have Benedict back, but I don't think that's going to happen either.
There's a lot of rumours going about that Brandon Benedict is retiring, which will be a great shame if he does. But I suppose we'll wait for any official announcement on that.
I personally, and this is just my personal view, I don't think you'll see Benny or K-Wall back at the Panthers next season.
Yeah, sadly, I think you're probably right.
Yeah, I completely agree with that as well on a personal standpoint. But like I say, my point was if those guys said, we're fully fit and we want to come and play, you wouldn't turn them down. And that's obviously the issue that we've got now is trying to create some separation from that team last season.
I think that's a really good point, though, because you do go on Facebook and the Cage and Twitter, and you are seeing people say, "Oh, we need this player," like mentioning 6 players from last season, and before you know it, we've got last season's roster again this season, and everybody slated last season's roster, and now people are saying that they want them back. So I do think that, like Andy says, it's a very fine line between keeping the gems and getting rid of the rough diamonds.
I think there is the opportunity to have quite a different roster this season, because don't forget that if we go 4 lines, that's 22 spaces, or 22 roster spots if you include the netminders, plus you've also got the addition of another dual national import as well. So Mosey obviously fills one of those spots, you've got another spot free for someone else, plus then your 11 work permits. So I think there will be a different makeup of the squad this season. I think my personal opinion is I think within the next 3 to 4 weeks we'll have all the returnees signed up, whoever it's going to be, and then I think Corey will start recruiting newer players, but I do think he will take his time this time.
I think the returnees, I don't think it would be that long before they were signed up personally. I don't think you'd be waiting 3-4 weeks for a returnee. I think because the offer would be on the table pretty much now if Corey wanted somebody back, from last season, the offer would be on the table now. I can't see it being 3-4 weeks before that then comes to light or gets signed. I think they'd be within the next 7 to 10 days, I think, max.
Okay, so we will leave Corey Neilson and the Nottingham Panthers there and move on to look at some other happenings in the Elite League since the end of the season. I suppose one of the most shocking and surprising happened on Monday of this week when the Sheffield Steelers announced that Gerad Adams, the coach who had bought them a playoff championship in 2014 and the league title this season, had been sacked. Andy, what was your reaction when you heard that news?
Pretty much the same as everybody else's in the whole of British ice hockey. I was completely gobsmacked, to the point where at first I thought it was a wind-up. When I first read that I caught a fan's tweet saying that they couldn't believe Gerad Adams had been sacked, and immediately I didn't believe it. It was only as I got further down my Twitter timeline that I thought, oh my god, this has actually happened. Just completely and utterly in shock, and still am, to be fair. I have no idea why he's gone. Having listened to the interview with Tony Smith and read the newspaper articles, I'm still not sure why they've sacked a coach that's just won the league title.
Aaron, do you think it's something that Tony Smith mulled over, or do you think it's a bit of a knee-jerk decision?
No, I don't think it's... I wouldn't class it as a knee-jerk reaction, because I imagine if it was knee-jerk, then they could have done it pretty much straight after playoffs. I think, obviously, they've had a couple of weeks to think about it, and I think, Tony Smith, whatever people might think of him, he obviously has an idea of where he wants to take the Steelers and where they want to be, which is, I would say, a very different place to where they are at the moment. And I'm guessing he's kind of thought about it, and he just, like he says, he doesn't believe Gerad Adams is that man that can take them to the place where Tony Smith wants the Steelers to be. So I think everybody initially goes, oh my god, they've just sacked the coach that won them the league. But I think you can also look at it another way. They had a chance of winning all the trophies. They didn't win the Challenge Cup when they had home ice advantage. They performed poorly in the playoff final, and they won the league, could you possibly say, because Bray had choked. So with the team that they had, did Adams get the best out of that team? I don't know. Only the people involved within the organisation would know that. So if you want to look at it that way, you might say, well, do you know what? He should have done better, and we should have had more than one of the 3 trophies available. I don't know, but I think when you win the league, you automatically do think that you're going to have a job next season. So, whatever you say about Tony Smith, he's obviously got the cojones to make these decisions, and I guess we'll see when the appointment is made whether it's all a load of spin or whether he is actually, truthful in what he says and what he plans for the Steelers, because that's a big statement what he's made.
It is indeed, and I listened to the interview that he gave to Radio Sheffield, and one of the things that stood out for me that not a lot of people have picked up on was when he said, I'm prepared to take 2 steps back in order to take 4 steps forward. And I thought that was a very, very, very interesting comment, because I thought he's basically saying that, I will take a lesser coach almost if in the long run it's better, which I suppose it makes sense. But after you've just won the league, I just find the whole situation completely and utterly bizarre. And the thing is, it then we have no idea who's going to come in, but it puts an immense amount of pressure on the new guy at the helm.
But if with his statement of where he wants to take the Steelers, and he talking about a coach, or maybe, I don't know, maybe a director of hockey even, who knows, but to look after everything, not just coaching the side. It's a bigger role than that. Why would you then go for a lesser coach? Surely that means you have to take a step up in the level of coaching. Because why would you bring a lesser coach in to fulfill a larger, more serious, maybe more important role?
Especially when Belfast have gone with the director of hockey for this past season. I think it's been fair to say it's not really worked out for them, with one man in charge of all that.
No, well, it didn't last season, did it? And I suppose that's another question that nobody really knows the answer to, do they? What's the situation in Belfast? Is it going to be the same again this year as what it was last season? Who knows? But I just can't. Why would you, the 2 steps back? Because what happens then? Okay, they make their appointment. What happens if the Steelers don't win anything next season?
We all laugh.
Yeah, well, they're going to come in for a lot of criticism, but that's, is Tony Smith then going to not panic, but is he going to stand by his, look, we will take 2 steps, this is a long-term project? Because I feel that when Doug Christiansen got, hired there, it was more of a long-term, turning the Steelers back into what Steelers should be. That didn't happen. Adams came in, galvanised the team, and they won the playoffs. He's then just won the league, and now he's gone. I read something saying that, they're turning into the Real Madrid of ice hockey. That's a dangerous situation to go down, though, when you're sacking successful managers after a successful season, because that's dangerous in my eyes.
Yeah, and the other thing as well about the 2 steps back comment, we know that Steelers fans are not a forgiving bunch, and they tend to be very fickle. And if things aren't going well for them, they'll walk away. They're not scared to walk away if they're not happy. And I think Tony Smith is taking a massive, massive gamble with what he's doing. But I suppose a lot depends on who he brings in to take that role. And Andy, I've heard Paul Thompson's name mentioned a lot. And one of the things that Tony Smith was saying was about an under-20s team to take part in a new under-20s league. And you've got to admit, if Paul Thompson does come in and take that Steelers role, he'd probably be a very, very good candidate, with the emphasis being placed on that under-20 team.
Yeah, I there's part of me that thinks that they must have at least an idea as to who's going to take over from Adams for them to make this kind of decision. Yes, they can say that they want to take it so far, and they want to get some sort of plan for the future in as to where they want to take Sheffield, but they must have some sort of idea already with regards who is that person to do that. And Paul Thompson is a fantastic coach, and he does tick the boxes that Tony Smith is requiring. I read somewhere as well this week that the team where he was in charge are going through some sort of financial problems as well, and there's talk of that there's going to be certain players and staff that are leaving for financial reasons as opposed to on ice reasons. So he does fit the bill, and at the moment it does seem like he might not be in Denmark next year. But they've, like you said, and it becomes an extremely high pressure job now, because of what has happened and the way in which Adams has gone after a successful season.
Aaron, just very, very quickly, could it be possibly seen as a bit of a poison chalice? Because we've mentioned Corey Neilson already tonight, and Neilson 8 seasons as Panthers coach. In that time, Steelers have had 5 coaches. Mm-hmm. So, could it be seen as that sort of poison chalice type of role or job?
It's a difficult one. I would say with the statement that Tony Smith made and the changes that he's looking to make, I don't think that's a quick fix to a certain degree, and I think he'll be looking for somebody to really implement things in that organisation and in that club. So I would say from a if I was a coach, then I would look at it as it's a great opportunity to have a massive impact on a club in the elite league. And at the end of the day, if you get sacked, I'm sure you'll get a nice payoff. So why I don't think people look at poison chalices and stuff like that. I think they look at it as a great opportunity to go in there and change a club for the better. That's what the Steelers will be hoping for anyway.
Okay, we asked for your tweets on this as well, so we had quite a few through. Liam McCausland, he says, one of the harsh realities of sport, thought he might have gone in January myself, which when Steelers were on a pretty poor run, it has to be said. Jason Ward, he says, harsh, but we can't really judge until we find out what Tony Smith's plan and recruitment will be. Paul Baum, our mate, he says, strange decision. Dreadful phrase, but success monster is right, which I think is something that Tony Smith used. They'll do what they think is needed to win. And finally, one from Franco Steeler, who says, fair enough, I didn't want him in the first place. Won squat in 9 years at Cardiff. Which I think is slightly unfair, because I believe he won the Challenge Cup at Cardiff. And probably, I think he punched above his weight at Cardiff, to be honest, considering that the budget they must have had. But interesting one. I mean, I think they're an unforgiving bunch, them Steelers fans, even if he has won them a playoffs and a league title. So it'd be very, very interesting to see who takes that mantle on. Well,
I was just going to say, until you actually see who he hires, then it's pretty hard to actually criticise Tony Smith, is it? Really, because if he then blows us all out the water with, say a Chuck Webber, then maybe it was the right decision.
Okay, we're going to move on now to Team GB in the World Championships. Of course, they came away with a silver medal from Group 1B in Eindhoven last week. I got to speak to the IHUK UK's media officer, Chris Ellis, and here's what he had to say. Fresh from a week in the Netherlands with Great Britain, I've got IHUK UK's media officer and a friend of the show and a friend of the Panthers, Chris Ellis.
Hello, Jono.
Hi, mate. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Just recovering after a roller coaster and I've got to say, quite an emotional week, really.
Yeah, it really was, and such a shame on Sunday to lose out on the silver medal. And I suppose I ought to start with, what was the mood like in the camp after that?
I mean, I'm not one to sort of be over the top, but there was devastation. I don't think I saw a player smile that evening for a long, long time. Jonathan Weaver was in tears. A few of the others were really emotional indeed. I think they believed that gold was in their grasp. They've got one game to win, and they were level 7 minutes to go, and then they lost the game. It was ironic because I said to Paul Thompson, who obviously was there involved in the setup and watching from upstairs, I said to him, wasn't it 7 minutes a few years ago when Paul was in charge and they missed out on going to the very top, the top group, and I think it was Kazakhstan scoring against Ukraine with 7 minutes to go, which denied GB a chance then to go up. And this was the same, except it was GB letting in a goal against Lithuania. But no, they were devastated because they were a great bunch of guys. I mean, always when you get GB going away, you get this togetherness. But on all my trips, I've never experienced something almost from the top, from the coaches and management and players off ice staff and the fans as well. I mean, you probably heard on the radio and on Premier Sports that the fans were just breathtaking, and it was it just kind of, it came from the top, and Pete Russell has a lot to give credit there. I think you've seen those phrases. He gave GB their identity back and that passion back, which maybe had been slightly missing in previous years. And it's heartbreaking that they came so close.
You mentioned the fans there. I mean, there was a good 300-400 GB fans in Holland. It's something that seems to have really taken off over the past probably 2 or 3 years. We always had the core Great Britain Supporters Club who were always loyal and travelled everywhere. But it just seems to have grown over the past 2 years. I mean, is there any particular reason for that?
It'd probably be good to speak to Alan and Annette from the Supporters Club, who might be able to tell you more. But by memory, I'm thinking maybe the Olympic qualifiers in Latvia started the big rise, because obviously that was the kind of biggest one as recent times, and GB obviously were 3 games away from the Olympics. It was always going to be a hard task for them to do that, with the calibre of teams that they came up against. And I think, a lot of people bought into that with the Olympic qualifiers. And I think it snowballed from there. I also think it's, again, other people were better qualified would know than me, but maybe it's the birth of social media and things like that, because I don't know, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, I used to watch games on the live scoring on the IHF website, and I don't know how people did it before then. I guess I really don't know. Newspapers the next day was a way to follow GB. So there must be lots of reasons, but I think the Olympic qualifiers started it, and the birth of social media, because obviously you get that message back, and you get people now are following what's going on, and we get tweets and messages from people back home who are like, this sounds exciting, I want to be part of that. So social media could be one, and there could be many reasons, but you feel it's building year on year, and you see newer faces, you see faces from clubs around the Elite League, and it's really fantastic. And what is great, and I don't know, many people might not know this, but the players, no matter what happens after every tournament, they go out there and they go and meet the GB Supporters Club. So they had to go through that sort of 45 minutes to an hour after the game on Sunday night, and it was really nice, and they awarded their player of the tournament. They gave their own mementos to the guys that had got 50 caps. The captain, Jono Phillips, gave a speech. So too did Jim Anderson from Ice Hockey UK. So too did Pete Russell, and you could see the appreciation there from the fans for the players, and also the players for the fact that the fans were out there. And once that ceremony was over, they didn't just leave. The players all mingled and talked to the fans, and for quite a long time.
Of course, you mentioned the media there, but this has probably been the best covered GB tournament there's ever been, because we had the live coverage on Premier Sports. Seth was there for the BBC commentary that was online. You, of course, were doing your ice hockey TV every day, before and after games, of the social media as well. It's probably been the best covered GB tournament of all time.
You're probably not far off. The one in Latvia was well covered as well, because again we got Premier Sports and we'd got BBC 5 Live, but it was before the days that we were doing our own TV as a thing as well. But yeah, it was greatly covered. I mean, having Seth Bennett there just lifted the output, because he is the best commentator, I believe, in the country. He commentated on the BBC sport for the Olympics and so on. So, that shows how good he is. So having Seth just, to me, lifted the media output. You'd obviously got Aaron Murphy and Paul Adey doing a fantastic job on Premier Sports. And then, of course, on the radio, you'd got Seth and whoever were his guests, be it Andy French, Andy Buxton or Paul Thompson. And what it did for me, because obviously I in the past have done the radio commentaries, which I really enjoy, but what it did for me was kind of enabled me to be more of a media officer. So, do the social media side of things more in detail. Obviously there's a lot of writing that goes on. It will be the press reports, the match reports, and then working with Colin Lawson for photographs, and then maybe specifically targeting Nottingham, Sheffield, let's say Belfast media for a player of their choice and some quotes. And then obviously working with the excellent Dave Burnham on those TV features, which was always done to kind of bring a flavour of the tournament back to the people back home to see what was going on. So, I would say this year that it was the biggest media output we'd got, and hopefully that can continue.
Of course, what people don't see is they see the IHUK UK TV bits that you did, but they don't tend to see the work that goes on behind the scenes to bring that to us. And I was seeing tweets where you and Dave were working late into the night to produce them. So, I mean, how many hours a day did you tend to be working just to put all that together?
Well, we went to the rink at 9 o'clock, and we probably didn't leave the rink until 11:30. That was our day. Get up, have breakfast, and then get to the rink at 9. It was much easier to work at the ice rink. One thing I must say, they were, a wonderfully friendly set of people there in the Netherlands. It was a much smaller rink to one we've been accustomed to by going on World Championships and so on. A lot smaller than I thought it would be, but it was quite intimate, and everyone, nothing was too much trouble. You may have seen that I rode a bike on one of the pieces, which was, a lady at the rink just sorted it. We said we need a car, a driver, and we need a bike, and within 20 minutes we'd got that, and testing was on the way. So it was wonderful from that, and obviously everybody played ball to help us with the various fun pieces that we wanted to do. But they were long days, from early morning till late at night, but they were fun, and I've got to give credit to Dave Burnham, who just didn't. He was either had a camera in hand or a computer, and editing and wait late into the night. And also Colin Lawson too, who just took the pictures that just lifted it as well. And I'd be sitting there demanding this picture, that picture, and to get these out. And not only were we tweeting his pictures, we were sending them to the local papers, because maybe they're the sites that people don't see. We'll send the stuff to the local papers and to the club websites, and obviously most of them put them on. I won't by any stretch and say that every club that we'd hope put them on did, but most of them did. And it's great. It's just great to have so many people who are happy and wanting to kind of work for GB and get the message out there.
One huge highlight that I do want to talk about from the week is, of course, Ben O'Connor's penalty shot.
Yep.
We'll talk about you trying to recreate it.
I was going to say his or mine. Let's talk about his, please.
We've heard from him, and he said that he planned to do that anyway, which takes balls of steel. It has to be said in that situation. But what we haven't probably seen too much is the reaction of the rest of the guys, because it really seemed to lift them.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we found out afterwards he knew he was doing it. You could see. I mean, you look back at the coverage, he got a big smile on his face. What he told us was he was really nervous. He did not look nervous. He looked as calm as anything. And don't forget, he got 5 minutes. And I asked him on the piece online, was he ever going to change his mind? Did he think he'd change his mind? And he was no. He was no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to change my mind. I'm going to stay. From the minute I decided, he said he asked Pete Russell. Pete Russell said, sure, gave him the green light. And then it's, the drama was 5 minutes while the goal was attended to. Well, I think first of all it was the Korean player, wasn't it? And then they had to get the goal. The goals kept coming off their moorings all the time, and the pegs had to be drilled in so many times. And it just added to the drama. And then when you did it, and when he did it, you just, it was just that look, and he just came back to the bench laughing. His teammates were laughing, and then afterwards they were all just unbelievable. It took nerves of steel at a 2-2 game against one of the favourites. And he kind of used that phrase "hero to zero," because I think if he'd missed and GB had gone on to lost the game, a lot of people would have criticised him. I wouldn't. I would have just said, he gave it a go. However you score, if a guy goes weekly tries to go through the 5-hole, it might not have worked. So, credit to him for trying it. It worked. And well, he was a hero. And we got immense coverage. North America, across all the sports networks. I had the Daily Mirror, the gentleman from the Daily Mirror, actually, who was a Sheffield Steelers fan. When we were in the Daily Mirror the day or so after, and the request for the video just was amazing from all around. Team GB wanted it, say TSN. It was remarkable. And for 48 hours, Ben O'Connor was the talk of the hockey world, and rightly so.
Looking ahead now, we've obviously got the World Championships next year to look forward to. We don't know where they're being held yet, but obviously there's not just the senior team.
Croatia. The smart money's is on Croatia.
So that'd be a nice trip out to Croatia.
Absolutely, yeah.
But of course, you don't just look after the senior team. There's the women's team that you've recently been in Dumfries. There's the under-20s, the under-18s that you also do the media for. So what's coming up over the next few months?
Well, I mean that's just a touch on that. I mean, I had the unfortunate of covering 2 gold medal games and obviously seeing silver in them both. And I can't put my finger on which was the most upsetting or disappointing, because the women could have beaten Kazakhstan and gone up, but sadly they lost by 2-0. And to see the dejection on their face, and there was many tears that night, and to know how close they came. And I hope now those girls are sitting at home with their silver medals and they're thinking this was a massive achievement. They'd come a long way with a change of coaches, and Cheryl and Michelle Smith excellently led the team. Nathan Craze as well. On the coaching staff, and they turned a team that would change coaches and managed to get a silver medal. So hopefully they're sitting at home, and hopefully our men as well will sit there maybe in a couple of weeks and think, hang on, we got relegated 2 years ago, we finished 4th last year, and I think if you'd said to them at the start you'll get a silver, they probably would have just about taken it. But going back to your original question, I mean, this is slightly a quieter time. It's that sort of run from December to April with the World Championships where it's absolutely manic. We had the 18s and the women's and then the men, literally in the space of 4 weeks. But now really the planning starts for next year. The next big thing is Congress in May, and at Congress in May they'll vote on where the tournaments will be, and we'll find out where that is in May. And then it's a case of obviously the new season beginning. The coaches obviously getting together. There'll be camps to report on. Pretty early on in the summer, especially the youngsters, the 18s and 20s will have camps. I know the women have got a lot of camps planned throughout the summer and into the early part of the new season. And they're things that we, as myself as media officer, is I'm trying to bring across, because for so long it's something that kind of people didn't know about. They didn't realise about, all these camps. Obviously it's a lot harder for the men to get a camp, and that's obviously a different subject and probably a different debate for another day. But at the lower levels, they have plenty more camps, and there's stuff to report on and so forth. So, although it's going to be slightly quieter as any off season is, it will be summer will be over and winter before we know it, and obviously the next batch of World Championship tournaments will be upon us.
One final question before I let you go, and a lot of people have been saying, isn't it about time that a World Championships came to Britain, the senior men's one? What are the chances of that happening in the near future?
I don't think it's far away, and I don't think it's a massive secret really that it's far away. I know Ice Hockey UK are very keen to host one. They've done the junior tournaments and they've done the women's tournaments. They've shown they can host it. Dumfries is a really ideal venue for those sorts of tournaments. Clearly, Dumfries wouldn't have the capacity to hold a men's tournament. But there's a lot of logistics that go into it. There's a lot to talk about and a lot to sort of consider. Where would you play it? Nottingham is a great venue. It's probably the best, maybe in my opinion. But would they sell 6,500 seats every night? Maybe not. Hopefully they would. Would they sell 4,500 to 5,000? Probably. That would be certainly achievable. We saw the GB Poland game got 3,500, I think it was, and that was for a friendly international, effectively. Then they could maybe consider somewhere like Braehead or Coventry, rinks that would probably sell out, but I don't think they'd have the dressing room space, and Coventry certainly not. So it would be that the venue, Sheffield would be potentially a venue, but again, is it slightly too big and things like that? But I know the powers that be, they've made it no secret. They've said it in broadcasts that we've done on Ice Hockey UK TV. I think at the women's and also before that as well, that they want to hold one. And I don't think we're much more than a couple of years away from a world championship. Of course, they've got to bid for it. They've got to get their bid accepted. The way it works is the IHF council members get a vote on each level and where it would go, and then the teams themselves get a vote as well. So you might see at Congress a bit of handshake going on. GB might say, well, we'll vote for you this year, and if we're in the same division next year, can you vote for us, and we'll almost like back your bid and such forth. So your best man to talk about if you ever want to learn the ins and outs of that is the Ice Hockey UK General Secretary Andy French, but so it's not just a case of GB saying, yeah, we want to bid it and they'll get it. They'd have to obviously get the backing of people to get it. But I do think that when you go away to these nations, that they love GB. Each time you go to a new rink, they love them. The people in the Netherlands were in love with the British fans. They couldn't get enough. I had members of staff saying, we want you to win this tournament. Even one or two said, we want you to beat us on the Saturday night, and that's saying something. And sadly, they were relegated in the end, the Netherlands. So I don't think that it's far away, and I think the desire and the passion is there from Ice Hockey UK and from other people in the IHF. I think they want to see a men's tournament in the UK.
Chris, thanks as always for your time. Really appreciate it, and thanks for joining us.
No problem. Speak to you soon.
So Chris Ellis there talking about all of GB hockey, and of course especially the World Championships. Aaron, I believe you was in and around the media team for the 2 warm-up games against Poland.
Yes, I was. Yes, that's correct.
And Chris mentioned there of what a fantastic spirit there was amongst the squad, and is that something that you saw?
Yeah, 100%. I think you can. I was very lucky to, like you said, being involved in that and being around the team for those 2 warm-up games, and you could just sense that there was a real togetherness. And this was reflected in the performances at the World Championship as well. Just a real attitude to go out there and give everything, and the never say die attitude. And I think it was just. You hear the players talk about how when they get to GB, it's nice to meet up with the lads, etc. The people that you compete against during the season, but there was a real togetherness. And I think sometimes in international sports, you get your little cliques maybe, and people, but I just really witnessed a togetherness and a united front, and I think that stems from the top down, and it was really nice to see, to be honest, and I think you saw that in the 2 warm-up games as well, and especially in the World Championships, like I said.
Andy, there was some pretty stellar performances throughout the week in the World Championships, and I suppose Chris and myself touched on it, but the penalty shot by Ben O'Connor was just something else.
What penalty shot by Ben O'Connor? I haven't seen it. No, in all seriousness, that is wow. I mean, you can't really say anything else that hasn't already been said. To have the guts and the wherewithal to even attempt something like that, even in training, even at rec hockey training and stuff like that, you'd try these sort of things, but even then you'd be slightly embarrassed about doing it in case you fluff it or you fall over or something like that. To do it in such an important game for your country, in a World Championships against who many people tip were the favourites, for it to turn out to be the game-winning goal, just everything about it was just absolutely incredible. And like Chris Ellis said, for 48 hours, and rightly so, Ben O'Connor was the talk of the hockey world.
Aaron, a lot's been said about the fact that the forwards didn't score enough goals, and Antoine Marie-Jean again sent us a tweet and he says, didn't score enough goals. How many came from forwards? When you consider the scores in some of the other games, all of our games were close calls. And I think that was it. It's just that we were relying a bit on the D to put the puck in the net.
Yeah, I mean the facts tell you that. Mark Richardson, Ben O'Connor. It's obviously they'd maybe taken some of the juice that the Panthers team had been drinking, because it's difficult when the forwards don't score and you're relying on your D. And I think from after the first game, maybe after obviously Mark Richardson, you think, oh well, at least the defenceman has contributed, and when the forwards kick into gear, then it's going to be really well, and it will help us. But I think you also maybe have to look at like the Elite League season as well. From a Panthers point of view, apart from Farmer, who did score, in the World Championship, Lacko's not had a real successful season in front of net. Boxall, I think played his game that he played at the Panthers a great performance, to say that it was his first, championship with GB. And then, this is just me from the outside, but I wouldn't say, Dowd has had a very successful scoring season. So to automatically bring that straight to GB form, I think is very difficult. So maybe it's a sign of GB forwards sort of season in the Elite League, but I think obviously that'll be something that Pete Russell will be looking to improve next time around.
Yeah, Andy, obviously Pete Russell's first championship in charge of the senior men's team, and I think he came out of the tournament with an awful lot of credit, and I think his stock has raised somewhat. Yeah,
absolutely. When it was announced, we did a podcast not that long after it was announced that he was going to be in charge. The general consensus was one of excitement because of what he'd done with the junior teams, and the other teams that he's been in charge with, and the fact that he'd made a lot's been said about the identity of this GB squad. And he came out from the start and said that he wasn't going to be picking players on reputation. It was going to be relative form and who he felt fit into the team that he wanted to create. So we've seen some players that obviously there's a few players that didn't make it because of injury perhaps, but obviously it's a World Championships that didn't have Ashley Tate or David Clark. And these guys are guys that for the past 10, 15 years, possibly in Tate's case, have been staples in that GB squad. And, he's given a chance to some people, people like Matt Haywood, Jonathan Boxall, Jack Prince, Liam Stewart before he got injured. He's given these guys the chance to come onto this stage and perform. And I think that it's a real good start from Pete Russell. I think realistically, from an outside point of view, it's probably better than we perhaps expected. Obviously, Sunday morning, if you'd have told me we were going to lose to Lithuania, it had been incredibly worse than what we'd expected because of how well the tournament had gone up until that point. But I completely agree that the profile of Pete Russell now, whilst there was an air of excitement because of the words he said and the things he'd done in the past, I think now he's really shown GB hockey what he's all about, and I think it is an extremely exciting time for Great Britain.
Some of the tweets that you sent us regarding Team GB, and Andy Stevenson said at the start, a silver would have been a great achievement, still is. The way it happened was a sore one, though. Still a lot of positives to take. Scott Rudnicki Bain, he says, a good start for the new coaching regime, but the best team won gold. Aaron, can you agree with that? South Korea were the best team overall?
It's a tough one, that is. I wasn't over there, so I can't say that I saw them live. I watched the games, but I thought we outplayed them in the game that we played against them. If the Croatian netminder hadn't been stretched off on the final day, would they have had a tougher game then? I'd maybe disagree with that, to be honest, but I suppose at the end of the day, whoever gets gold usually does deserve it, but to call them the best team, I'm not 100% sure on that one.
Okay. Tana Crawford, she says, brilliant teamwork, shame they didn't win gold, but should be more than happy with silver. And I understand the sentiment, but Andy, I think looking at their faces when they was presented the medals, they weren't happy with silver come Sunday afternoon.
No, and Chris Ellis mentioned it in the interview. There was devastation in that locker room. Obviously, he mentioned Jonathan Weaver's reaction. You've got to think for someone like Jonathan Weaver, there's a fair chance that was his last World Championships. And to be that close and have it in your own hands, and then for it to go the way it did, it's going to be heartbreaking for them. And like you say, from an outside point of view, from us watching it on the telly back home, you could see the reaction of the players coming across from where we were, thousands of miles away, to obviously be able to interview the players and be back with the players like Chris was. Is going to see it, tenfold. And as heartbreaking and as gut wrenching as it is, it could only do Great Britain hockey good. I think. I don't think the way we lost this tournament is going to see a detriment to the GB setup. If anything, I think it will make them a lot more determined, and mainly because of the age of the majority of the players, because it is a relatively young team, from coaching staff downwards. So it is heartbreaking the way that they've lost out. And Aaron raises a good point with regards to the netminder. Obviously, it's certainly no disrespect to Croatia, but having to watch your goalie get stretchered off is not something anybody wants to do. But we've seen it as Panthers fans when we went to the Continental Cup in Amiens, where a team's played the backup goalkeeper, and they've ended up, conceding more goals or losing a game or whatever. If Croatia's first choice netminder was available for the full game, who's to say that they wouldn't have taken South Korea into penalties or into overtime like we did? So they'd have lost the point for the regulation win. So it is one of them things where it was devastating in the way that it happened, but. In the long run, I think it could only benefit us.
Okay, and I think we will leave it there for this show, unless there's anything that you guys want to add.
No, not from me.
Okay, all that remains to be said then is thank you to you, Aaron, and you, Andy, for taking part.
No problems.
Thank you, Jono.
Thank you. And also many, many thanks to Chris Ellis for taking the time to do an interview with us. We will be back later in the off-season as more things happen and more players are signed. Won't give an exact date yet because, it depends when things happen, but hopefully not too long. So until then, thanks very much for listening to this special podcast, and we will see you again soon.